Tonight on PBS News Weekend, the role a small but vocal number of social media users play in distorting reality and the election year consequences. Then courting voters in Ohio, the effect this fall's state Supreme Court elections could have on issues like civil rights and abortion, and how scientists are working to beat a deadly fungus that's devastating North America's bat population.
We're at a very dire point now because some species are down over 90%. But it does seem like there might be several different ways that wildlife biologists could actually help to restore the bat.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by
Consumer Cellular. This is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket.
Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular,
You get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing.
have a nice day.
and with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm John Yang. With just 9 days to go until Election Day, the presidential candidates and their running mates are heading into the home stretch. Their travels are being dictated by poll numbers and the calculus of getting to 270 electoral votes.
People feel real pain. But like Paul, we must remember that divine power works through our actions.
At the Church of Christian Compassion in Philadelphia this morning, Vice President Harris tapped into her faith to deliver her message.
I see a nation determined to turn the page on hatred and division, to chart a new way forward. I see Americans from so-called red states and blue states who are ready to bend the arc of history toward justice.
Philadelphia is the largest city in a state critical to winning the White House. She plans to blitz all 7 battleground states over the next 4 days.
We got a guy that's openly saying he wants to be a dictator, a guy that wants to take away reproductive rights.
Running mate Tim Walz was in one of them, Nevada, pressing the campaign's focus on reproductive freedom. That was also part of former First Lady Michelle Obama's message to voters last night in Michigan.
So please, do not hand our fates over to the likes of Trump, who knows nothing about us, who has shown deep contempt for us. Because a vote for him is a vote against us, against our health, against our worth.
Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance made the rounds of the Sunday shows. On CBS's Face the Nation, Vance denied the Democrats' assertion that a vote for the Republican ticket is a vote against women and pivoted to talk about the economy.
I think it's a more interesting reflection of Kamala Harris's campaign that at this late stage, she's not talking about how she can lower the price of groceries because she raised the price of groceries.
So you made it up?
Before something goes out there. No, I said that
In a combative interview on CNN's State of the Union, Vance was pressed about former President Trump's references to the enemy from within.
I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military. I think Nancy Pelosi is an enemy from within.
He's talking about people rioting after the election. I think
the Pelosi's were rioting after the election?
You're using 2 separate phrases. He said about using the military, that far-left lunatics, people who riot in the wake of an election, people who burn down American cities in the summer of 2020, yes.
This afternoon, Trump is to speak at a rally in New York's Madison Square Garden. In the Middle East, Egypt has proposed a 2-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. during which 4 Israeli hostages would be freed. There's been no immediate response from either side. In northern Gaza, an Israeli offensive is entering its third week. Airstrikes killed at least 22 people in Beit Lahia, most of them women and children. Hamas is praising an attack at a bus stop north of Tel Aviv. Dozens of people were injured when a truck rammed into a bus. Police are investigating it as a terrorist incident. And in Jerusalem, hecklers disrupted a speech by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at a ceremony honoring the victims of the October 7th attacks.
משפחות יקרות, זכר קרוביכם.
Those people were shouting shame on you in Hebrew. Many Israelis blamed Netanyahu for the failures that led to the attacks and for failing to bring home all the hostages. Separately, in his first public comments on the retaliatory strike in Iran, Netanyahu said Israel had disrupted Iran's defense and missile capabilities. New satellite images show damage to a secret military base that may have been linked to Tehran's nuclear weapons program. Iran's supreme leader said the attack shouldn't be either exaggerated or minimized. He did not call for a military response. The president of Georgia is refusing to recognize the results of Saturday's elections. She said the country was the victim of a Russian special operation. Early results give the ruling party 53% of the vote, but European election observers express concerns about vote buying, double voting, and physical violence and intimidation. Georgia's ruling party has become increasingly authoritarian, cracking down on free speech just as neighboring Russia has. Still to come on PBS News Weekend, the importance of down-ballot races like the one for the Ohio State Supreme Court. And scientists search for ways to battle a bat-killing fungus.
This is PBS News Weekend from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington, home of the PBS NewsHour, weeknights on PBS.
Facebook co-founder Mark Zuckerberg has been quoted as saying that social media is a reflection of society. But researchers at New York University have concluded that it's not an accurate reflection. They say it's more like a funhouse mirror, distorted by a small but vocal minority of extreme outliers. It's a finding that has special resonance in this election season. NYU psychology professor Jay Van Bavel is one of the authors of the paper that reported that research. Mr. Van Bavel, are there particular topics or issues that tend to be distorted more than others?
Yeah, it tends to happen for all kinds of issues online, but there are many issues where they found, for example, less than 1% of people are spreading the most amount of misinformation about them.
Is it possible to characterize who these people are and why they're doing it?
One of the big factors that seems to be driving this is that it's people with extreme beliefs or extreme political ideologies, and they tend to be posting by far the most content. And so therefore, when we tune in, we're mainly seeing views from the extremes.
But what motivates them? Why are they doing it?
They motivate it for a lot of reasons. One is that they're passionate about it. And whether we're talking about politics or Taylor Swift fans, it's something that motivates them to go and share their thoughts. But many people are also doing it because they're trying to convince others. They're trying to push it like their beliefs, but also a little bit like propaganda.
And you say it's all sorts of topics, but are there some that are particularly prevalent in this manner?
Yeah, one of the big ones is politics. A very small proportion of people are posting the vast majority of content about political issues.
And what's the real-world effect of this?
One of the real-world effects is that when people tune in, they get misperceptions about what the average person believes. So if I log into social media and I see post after post after post by people who are extreme, it misleads me to believe what the average person on the street believes.
And what's the effect of that?
The effect is that it can lead to what's called false polarization, that we think that people are far more extreme in the real world than they actually are. And that can lead us to disengage from people who are different than us or belong to different parties or groups.
What's the chicken the egg here? What is it that the political divisions drive this distortion, or are the distortions driving the political division?
We think it's a little bit of both. Certainly that we're at the point of polarization in America that's greater than any point in the last 40 years. And it's driven more now by out-group hate than in-group love. So that means a lot of people are feeling more hostile, and so they're more motivated and outraged to post more content. But what it does is, because it creates this misperception of reality, it then infects the rest of our minds, and it makes us misperceive what our neighbors believe.
You know, a few years ago, the Wall Street Journal got some internal documents from Facebook. And one of the things they found was that they were looking at changes in the algorithm to address this division and this sort of sensationalism. And it said that Mark Zuckerberg was resistant to this because he feared it would reduce engagement, that this sort of thing is what's driving things on social media. Is there a way to change it, or is there a way to fix it if that's sort of their business model?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example of a study we just finished. We paid people a few dollars to unfollow some of the most hyper-partisan accounts on X or Twitter. And after the time of the study was over, after a few weeks, we paid them their money and said, you can refollow these accounts. Most people chose not to follow those accounts. And what we found is that the impact on them lasted up to 11 months. They had less partisan animosity. They were sharing more accurate information. And so it turns out that people, if they stop following these accounts, they feel better, they become less hostile. And given that, they don't want to refollow them.
If you don't have a grant that's giving you all this money to pay these people to stop following them, how do you get people to stop following these accounts?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing we're trying to do right now is just educate people about the results. And I will say this to Mark Zuckerberg, we measured engagement, and this did not reduce engagement. What we did was, in another condition, we paid people to follow accounts that were uplifting and educational and interesting, and people actually felt a greater sense of well-being and wanted to continue following those accounts. So I think if people consider their social media feed a little bit like their diet and try to make it a little bit healthier, it turns out it can have a big effect on their well-being and the quality of information they get.
What about the supply side of this? You're talking about the demand for these accounts. How do you remove the incentives that people have for this? Because a lot of it is because these are the sorts of things that get reposted.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. It turns out that the extreme people are posting this and also amplifying content that's shared by others. And I will say that this can be really dangerous. So this happened on Facebook during the pandemic, where they were called the Disinformation Dozen. 12 accounts were creating and the origin of over 60% of the misinformation about vaccines. And so Facebook actually got rid of them. And the incentive structure for those accounts was not only engagement, but they were making money. Almost all of them were selling dubious health products on their websites. And so there's always going to be an economic incentive for people to push extreme and misleading information. And so we have to change those incentives for them.
What can someone who is on social media and wants to be on social media do to try to avoid these influences?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at your own feed and think about who's sharing accurate or uplifting information and who is trying to turn you against other groups or other people. And you can do a little bit to curate it. So I think every New Year's Eve, you know, most people in this country set a New Year's resolution to like have a healthier diet or exercise more, spend more time with our family and friends. We can also think about like, you know, making this one of our goals and resolutions is like, what can I do about my information diet to make it healthier for me, to create a better sense of well-being, to reduce the feeling of animosity that I feel towards other people.
Jay Van Bavel of New York University with another New Year's Eve resolution to consider. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This past week, a county judge in Ohio struck down the state's near total ban on abortions. He said it violated a voter-approved constitutional amendment protecting reproductive rights. The ruling's likely to be reviewed by the state Supreme Court, which underscores the importance of races on many state ballots this fall that are flying under the radar.
Fixing the border is tough. So is Kamala Harris.
But businessman and political outsider Bernie Moreno will fix it.
Ohio's airwaves are filled with campaign ads.
I'm Sherrod Brown, and I'll never stop fighting for Ohio workers.
For presidential and U.S. Senate candidates.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
But what about the 3 other statewide races? Do you know who's running for state Supreme Court?
No.
Do you know who's running for the state Supreme Court?
Bernie Moreno and, what's his name?
Do you know who's running for state Supreme Court?
No. Sherrod Brown.
That's actually the U.S. Senate. The contests for 6-year terms here on the state Supreme Court aren't getting nearly the attention that the presidential and Senate races are getting here in Ohio. But the outcome of those court elections could have long-term consequences for Ohioans in areas like civil rights, redistricting, and especially abortion. Ohio is one of 33 states voting on Supreme Court justices this year. contests that are usually low-key and low-profile.
I wish more people were paying attention.
Justice Melody Stewart, a Democrat and the first black woman elected to the court, is running for re-election.
The other day, I think I was in 6 different counties, and then the engine light came on in my car.
Earlier this month, she met with voters at the home of a supporter in a Columbus suburb.
Card for you, too. All right? We drive ourselves around. You know, we schlep our own signs. We hand out our campaign signature. I doubt if Bernie Moreno and Sherrod Brown have placed a sign anywhere.
But the posts they're running for can be very powerful.
State Supreme Courts are hearing major high-stakes cases across the country.
Alicia Bannon is director of the Judiciary Program at the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU Law School and editor of the State Court Report.
State Supreme Courts are typically the final word in interpreting state law and state constitutions. So they're really powerful institutions, and they're becoming even more important as in a number of critical areas, the U.S. Supreme Court has increasingly stepped back from being a major source of rights protection.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. The Honorable Supreme Court of Ohio is now in open session pursuant to adjournment.
In Ohio, the Supreme Court will have to consider the state's abortion restrictions in light of the constitutional amendment approved last year with 57% of the vote. It says every individual has a right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions. Next month's election will shape the composition of the 7 justices who will hear the cases. 3 seats are at stake, and the candidates are running on party tickets. The possible outcomes range from a commanding Republican majority to a slim Democratic majority, which would be the first time in decades that there'd be more liberal justices than conservatives.
That's unlikely given how the state is likely to go in terms of Republican vote. Voters can only use ballot drop boxes to deposit.
Karen Kassler is the State House Bureau Chief for Ohio Public Media and hosted the weekly show, The State of Ohio.
When you've got people who are motivated to vote Republican, people who are motivated to vote Democrat, that party label is really important here. Usually the Supreme Court races had been at the bottom, and there was a lot of fall off between the top of the ticket and the bottom of the ticket. I don't think there's going to be as much fall off this time just because you've got those partisan labels and they're up higher.
While voters may not be paying a lot of attention to these races, groups on both sides of reproductive rights are.
While all races are important, we care about them all, there is nothing more important than the Ohio Supreme Court.
Mike Ganadakis is president of Ohio Right to Life, which has endorsed all 3 Republican candidates.
We believe on the issue of abortion, we would want a conservative voice deciding what these words mean. The court, the third branch of government, now needs to weigh in.
This election in some ways is an extension of the important vote for the Reproductive Freedom Amendment that we passed last year.
Emily Freeman is an abortion provider with Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio, which has endorsed all 3 Democratic candidates.
Passing that Reproductive Freedom Amendment allowed us to slowly, dismantle those restrictions and return access back to the state of Ohio. I think the take-home message is that people in Ohio believe that abortion is health care.
Unlike others on the statewide ballot, court candidates like Justice Stewart can't say much about reproductive rights. One reason why these 3 races are being watched so closely, of course, is because of abortion. Can you say anything about that?
Only that, the Reproductive Freedom Amendment is the law of the state of Ohio with regard to reproductive rights. And really, that's kind of all there is to say about it, at least at this point.
Stewart's Republican opponent, fellow Justice Joe Deters, declined an on-camera interview, but said in a statement, "I swore an oath to uphold our Constitution, and that's what I do every day. There might be issues from time to time that I personally disagree with, but that will never affect the duty I have to uphold that oath. It's dangerous when judges are taking partisan approaches to the cases they are handling." Yet so little attention is being paid to these contests that when voters mark their ballots, many of them may not know much about the candidates beyond their party labels. The association between bats and Halloween dates back thousands of years. It's based on the superstition that they're omens of death. And now, as Ali Rogan tells us, North American bats are facing a deadly threat themselves.
For nearly 2 decades, bats across North America have been decimated by a deadly disease called white nose syndrome. Patches of pale white fuzz caused by a fungus appear on infected bats. First observed in 2006, the pathogen quickly began spreading after appearing in New York State. It has since killed millions of bats across the country. Yet, according to recent reporting in the New York Times, for the first time in years, researchers are feeling hopeful in their fight against the disease. Carl Zimmer is a columnist for the New York Times and recently wrote about this. Thank you so much for joining us. So, how did white nose syndrome begin, and why did it spread so quickly?
It originated in Europe. And in Europe, the bats there are able to fight it off. Somehow this fungus was able to get across the Atlantic. It's possible a traveler was exploring a cave in Europe, got it on his boot, and then they traveled to New York and the spore was spread here. But once it got to the United States, the bats themselves started to spread it across the entire continent.
You write about the shock that some researchers had when they came upon the first examples of this. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like for those researchers who entered these caves in the United States and saw the toll that this disease had taken on the bat population?
The first biologists who discovered white nose syndrome were just shocked because they would literally walk into a cave that they had been visiting for winters, studying hibernating bats for years, and there would be a pile of dead bats on the cave floor. They would see caves that were completely empty. And then this fungus made its way across North America and further west. Biologists knew it was coming. And then, one winter they'd come into their caves and they too would see these huge piles of bat bodies. Millions of bats have died as a result of this.
And it's run rampant for so many years, but why are researchers now hopeful that they might have made some progress in tackling this disease in North America?
We're at a very dire point now because some species are down over 90%, and over half of bat species in North America are at risk of extinction, and white nose syndrome is part of that threat. But it does seem like there might be several different ways that wildlife biologists could actually help to restore the bats, and those projects are going on right now.
And tell us about those projects. What sort of solutions have researchers found have been helpful?
One possibility is to use a non-toxic chemical that is sprayed on the walls of abandoned mines and other places where bats like to roost for the winter. And what happens is that this chemical spray basically arrests the fungus. The spores just can't attack the bats. They're just inert, basically. And some preliminary studies have showed that this actually ends up allowing more bats to survive the winter and not get sick with white nose syndrome. So that's one solution. Another is to actually bring in more cold air into these shelters where they hibernate, because at colder temperatures, it seems that bats are able to go into a deeper state of hibernation and they can withstand the fungus attack. And in the spring, when they come out of hibernation, they can rebound.
Let's take a step back and talk about the importance of bats to the ecosystem and why it matters so much that this massive die-off be stopped.
A lot of people are scared of bats. They would rather not deal with bats near them. But you have to remember that bats are essential to many ecosystems. Some species of bats will pollinate flowers, so these flowers just totally depend on the bats to spread them around. And bats also eat vast amounts of insects. And if you take bats away, those insects can explode. We've actually seen this in action where in counties where there's high levels of white nose syndrome, and so bats are disappearing, the insects are booming so much that farmers are actually having to put more insecticide on their farm fields. And that can actually lead to human health problems. And so you can see how if you let bats disappear, there are going to be a whole bunch of problems, just not only for nature, but for us as well.
You mentioned earlier how this disease likely started in Europe and traveled to North America. What does that say about the dangers of travel in terms of spreading these pathogens far and wide?
We have to recognize that we all live on the same planet, and as far away as Europe might seem from us, or China, or any other place on Earth, diseases can get around. It can take just one fungal spore on one boot to endanger all the species of bats on a new continent. And, we've seen that with human diseases as well. Just with COVID, for example, COVID started in one place in China, and then it was soon all around the world. And so if we're going to try to lessen the threat of all of these pathogens, we have to be thinking globally.
Carl Zimmer with the New York Times with a hopeful story about an important species. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that is PBS News Weekend for this Sunday. I'm John Yang. For all of my colleagues, thanks for joining us. Have a good week.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by and with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.